Are you
Hi,
working
everyone.
on?
Welcome to the Alpha Strike podcast. Here we are again after Nova. Um, got myself, Daniel, and co-host Red. Tonight we have a special guest, Richard Siegler and John Lennon from Brohammer. Both two top 10 players in the ITC world, coming off of strong finishes from Nova and also the Invitational. So, without further ado, we're going to just jump right on in with both feet. I'm going to introduce you to Richard Siegler, the man of the hour, the winner of Nova, the Sir and Knighted champion by John there, by the pictures you've seen on the website. Um, Richard, tell everyone a little bit about yourself real fast, and if you guys out there want to see their list, go to BCP or you can also go check them out. I believe they're both on Stat Center as well. So, Richard,
Sure,
you're up.
sure thing. Thanks for having me. I'm Richard Siegler. I am a member of Team Brohammer, one of the strongest teams in the South region right now. I am currently the number one Tau player in the ITC, and I just had the great fortune of winning the Nova Open GT.
You want to give a little rundown on how you got to that spot?
Sure. So I really only recently started playing competitively in 40K at the end of last year, really in the fall. And so this season, I've really put in the work to just play every weekend, traveling to tournaments, going to majors, going to GTs, and I've just practiced with some of the best players in the country week in, week out, and that's really helped me improve significantly. And so I didn't come in expecting to win Nova. I was hoping for top 16, but I was just able to go through. I had some favorable matchups, and I just played the best I could.
Excellent. Well, you did a great job. I mean, there was even a lot of comments on the GW stream about how well you were handled yourself and your playability when you played Nick Rose. Give us a brief rundown of your 9 games, what you had to conquer and go through.
Sure thing. So I played several Imperium lists. I started off against a pure guard list, similar to Brandon Grant's style, with a lot of infantry, the Bulgrin, tank commanders. Really tough game. He played really well, but I was eventually able to get into the tank castle and clear him off progressive objectives. I played against some Eldar flyer lists, one which had almost max scatter bikes, which are absolutely devastating against shield drones. So I was very fortunate in that game that I was able to survive long enough and kill enough of the flyers to end up winning. It was actually a draw, a 24-24 draw, but I ended up killing more than he did. So that was the closest game that I played all weekend. I also played against Pure Custodes list. He hadn't played Tau before, but he gave it his best shot, and we talked after about some tips and charging through ruins, getting around grab drones. Um, and then moving into the second day, I played against some more Eldar lists, another Imperium list, pure Admech. Going into day 3 was one of my toughest games. He had 3 Icarus crawlers, 3 Scorpius of the AdMech tanks, and was just able to clear most of my drones in the first 2-3 turns. And so that game, I really had to rely on the Riptide surviving long enough for my characters to do the damage. So that was the second closest game I played all weekend. And then the final stretch was against 3 Gene Circle players. And thanks to this man right here, John Lennon, I have the best practice against Gene Circle in the country, probably. So I was very prepared going into all of those matches after our ATC prep. And so, I was very comfortable playing those, even though they were, some of the best players in the country. I was very comfortable in the matchup, and you got to see some of that on stream in the final.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point. I mean, you had one of the best Gene Stealer players there at your disposal, kind of thing in the South there in Florida. So, what do you think your MVP was with your army list?
It was absolutely the two-man shield drone units. Not only were they easy ways to get recon points, so I didn't have to, rely on all the kill secondaries, but they were just tremendous in screening out all the different combat armies I faced, and they were incredible in just surviving long enough to keep the Riptides alive, because they're much easier to hide than the larger tactical drone units. So the two-man shield drone units, I know a lot of people were suspicious about them, but they were absolutely my MVPs.
Well, and so that's the Nova winning list, right? And so for all the net listing or the meta gamers out there, what's the difference between that and your average ITC list?
My average ITC list is the same exact list, minus the Fire Warriors, with 3 more shield drones added, and the hover drone on the Ethereal. I still take all of the two-man drone units because of the same reasons, because of screening, and because they're very good against high volume, high damage weapons like the Avenger Gatling cannons and Caladius tanks. You don't want to waste all those shots on just 2 shield drones.
Right. Well, and I don't know how much you keep up with any of the buzz or conversation about it, but that was something people were saying in ITC, and trust me, I'm with you. I get it. Like there's people are like, oh well, these two-man shield drone units, like they can't survive in ITC, but then that's kind of why my question was leading, because I know I've seen from some of your past stuff that you've had those before. So it wasn't just a Nova format deal. It's something that you specifically have been effectively running. We'll see if it catches on. People saying, oh, you're running a Siegler list or something like that. So
We'll see.
So I've actually caught myself saying that several times when I see people imitating. It takes a lot of skill to do what he does, and I mean, there's several Tau players in Brohammer down there that I've ran even against Richard Martin, for instance, running very similar list, and very talented guy himself. So with the Siegler list, do you see anything changing heading into the long stretch here of the end of the year?
It's going to kind of depend on what we see in the September FAQ. Uh, if things like Eldar Flyers aren't going to be prominent in the meta, and other kind of key fly units, I can see dropping 1 or 2 of the velocity trackers and instead going with target locks on the Riptides, just to help with the chaos and the Genestealer cult matchups. But in general, I think I'm going to just roll with the same list because I've been playing it for months now, and it's been very successful at all sorts of different events. So I'm going to kind of just stick with the tried and true for now.
I mean, that brings up a big point, right? I mean, we've said here on the podcast as well. Once you get something, you want to try to stick with it and practice with it and learn what the ins and outs of it are. So that's great advice. So we're gonna run into John here. John got to play in the invitation. I was privileged enough to stand by and judge and watch all the games. Streamed a little bit of them and watched the golden tanks of doom get smirked at by GW while John pushed them around the table a little bit. So give us a little bit of what you thought of the Invitational, and then your run at the GT.
Okay, so quick introduction. I'm John Lennon. I'm currently #1 Genestealer cult player, defending #1 in the South, but I think I might be losing that this year. I made the horrible mistake last fall of try pointing some random Tau player and teaching him how to play the game, and now he's better than me. That was a yikes.
Thanks, John.
So to see to my own destruction there. But yeah, I went to the Invitational this year, and I brought my Custodes. This was kind of as a cheat because I thought that a mobile firepower list would do very well at Nova, but I also didn't want to play my Genestealer for third straight game. I really enjoyed the Invitational. I definitely had the power. I saw the power of the Custodes list. I bring the camera a little closer here. I really enjoyed it just because of the quality of competition that I had with all the guys there. I ended up going 3-1. I won my first 3 games relatively handily, mostly on just the firepower of what I was bringing. I had the 3 Caladius tanks and the Orions, and all of it together was overwhelming. I went first when I needed to, and I really had the firepower to put a hurting on a couple of opponents, and that just let me put the game away very quickly. Overall, I thought the Invitational was very fun. I did end up losing to Nick Donavati in the final game on that notorious GW stream table with the, 1.5 foot tall ruins that I couldn't see over. Certainly, he played that one very well, though. It was very, very tight. I think it came down to a charge he made on turn 5. It was an 8-inch charge, and then I threw a Tanglefoot grenade and turned it into a 10-inch charge. And he just dropped 2 5s on me and won the game. that one hurt a little bit, but it's Nick, so you know he's always gonna have some plan on there. He's always gonna have one little trick. Even if you think you've got him down, he probably still would have found a way.
Yeah, I mean, you still did exceptionally well, and you even did well in the GT. So congrats on the Invitational. Obviously, when you're playing top level people like that, it shows your skill level is at a different game than most. And what did you think of the GT?
The GT was a little more difficult with the Genestealer cult. Definitely, they're very strong in this format. There were several of them in the top 16, so they obviously had the potential to do very well. With that said, because of the Nova terrain, which was 2 big line of sight blocks in the center, nothing else blocking sight in the rest of the board, it did mean that Genestealer cult, you had to be very, very careful, where literally any mistake and the entire you're going to get shot. So I even games that were against maybe less challenging opponents, I still had to play all 6 turns, play 2 hours and 50 minutes of the 3-hour time to close everything out. So it was definitely very taxing. I'll give you a quick rundown of my games. My first game I played against a gentleman who's running some Yanari and Eldar. Second game was against a guy with Imperial Knights and the Leviathan with Guilliman. Both of those games were over pretty quickly. I just had I was able to clear screens and get the melee in very quickly, and that was kind of all she wrote. But I was able to talk to them about how they can defend against that kind of stuff. Give them some pointers for next time. Round 3 is when it started to get difficult. I played 10 Venom list, which is kind of a nightmare for Genestealer cult, just because of how quickly Venoms kill infantry and the fact that they all fly. Again, I was able to power through it just by outmuscling them, pushing them off objectives, and playing for the late game push, where I got onto all my progressive objectives on turns 4, 5, 6. Game 4 was almost the exact same thing against a Necron list with a ton of Tomb Blades. Followed the exact same plan, executed it well. Round 5 was a challenging one. I played against, I think it was Brad Chester with an Orc list. And I had never really played against a shooty Orc list because there's not a lot of Orcs in Florida. I ended up losing that game very close. I got maxed on my progressives, though, so I was able to get some good points and get into the top 16, but definitely learned some things about how to play that game and where I need to put my units that I think will help me the next time I play it. Once I got into the Invitational, went through Jeremy Knox. Who's the number 1 seed with his 18 Harlequin bikes. He was a very skilled opponent. I was able to, again, get a couple key wraps off by destroying a Venom, making the contents pile out, and consolidating into them by limiting where he could pile out of the vehicle. That probably won me the game. I finally got my revenge on Andrew Gagno in round 7, took out the 2-time defending champion. That was probably my favorite game of the weekend. That was very satisfying because I was kind of living in Andrew's pocket. He had beaten me the last 2 times we played. So getting out of that and, getting my revenge at his event definitely felt good. Unfortunately, after that, I had to play Mr. Siegler. And as you can guess, the fact that Mr. Siegler won the event, it did not go very well for me. As Siegler mentioned, him and I spent a lot of time practicing this game. Before ATC, we talked a lot about this matchup. He knows exactly how to play it, how to defend against all of my tricks. And I did not come up with any new ones in that time. Unfortunately, he pounded me. He played very conservatively, which let me rack up my progressive points, get some points out of it. But that's because he didn't need to do anything crazy, because with Endgame, he was always going to be able to shoot me off and max his score at the end. So that's exactly what he did. He just made sure I was never really doing damage to him, and he kept shooting me off. And that made sure that I was just never quite able to catch him. That's my weekend. I was paired for a 9th game against an AdMech player, Lewis, but I kind of realized after about 15 minutes that I just did not have the energy for that. Game 13 of the weekend, and I decided to respectfully forfeit and go watch win it all.
Yeah, so it's a funny story as well because Siegler was not supposed to be there, and when it was announced that he was jumping on a plane to come win Nova, there was a couple of folks that I know I was around that were, kind of worried.
Yeah, so, I got worried. There are very few people that I go into the game think that I'm probably not going to win. And right now, with the armies we're both playing, Siegler's probably like the worst person in the country for me to play.
Yeah, I think I was sitting next to Mark Perry when he said, "Oh shit, Siegler's coming." So that says it all, kind of thing. But yeah, so congrats on both of you. Actually, you guys did a phenomenal job making it through the Invitational onto the top table. Again, that terrain on the GW stream was very difficult to not only watch but to see people play on.
Mm-hmm.
So. That was a situation. I know GW, while I was judging, was talking directly about how they could improve a little bit. I know Nick Nanavati played all 4 games on that, so he was very well versed in that terrain.
Yeah, we were good as the Gene Stealer cult table because
the Gene Stealer cult table, yes, and so yeah, it was a very interesting weekend. What's next for you as far as I see you're building something right now. So is that top secret?
It's not top secret. It's Space Marines.
Okay. So you're going to come to the dark side?
Yeah, it's kind of
like
the
cookies.
Light blue side. We'll see about that. I'm building Space Marines. Right now it's just getting some of the basic units, and I got a lot of playtesting I have to do with them. But Space Marines are probably what's next for me. Not that I don't love Gene Stealer Cult. I just think that they're not in. I've been playing them a lot, and they're very taxing, and I kind of want to just do something else for a little bit. I've got my Custodes. They're a fun break army, but Space Marines look very powerful, and they look very well suited to beat Gene Stealer Cult. I just think they have a lot of tools, and I think that a good player can take that codex and make a very good take-all-come army with it. So I kind of want to take my stab and see if I can make my mark on the meta.
Excellent. So that kind of brings us back to the full circle, and where we were going to go to next is Richard. Where do you see yourself and Tau in the meta? Not only as a top-ranked ITC player, but one of the best in the South. The South, especially Florida, was given a bad rap a while back on podcast and from the West Coast and whatnot, saying that there was no good players in the South or Florida in general. Where do you see your Tau in the next meta shift based off of what we do know?
For now, I think Tau are going to be in an excellent place. For me, they're in the right up there with the top 6 or so factions. The one bad matchup that Tau has, or at least the Suit Tau version, is Chaos right now. And that is particularly the Chaos build that relies on 60+ Plague Bearers and the Mirror. Both of those units are incredible against Tau, and you have to play in a very specific conservative way in order to win that game. So if Plague Bearers get hit in the FAQ somehow, say if they change the rule where if they go under 20 models, they lose that extra -1 to hit, that would be enough where Tau can comfortably play in the meta and not have to worry about Chaos as much. They'll still be a troublesome matchup, but it won't be quite as difficult as it is now. Other than that, Tau sometimes struggles against these pure shooty Imperium lists with the Scorpius Disintegrators and Triple Caladius, or a Knight with all of that. All these basically pure shooty armies. They can be difficult because sometimes they're just going to chew through most of your drones in the first 2 or 3 turns. And after that, you just have to survive. So you have to be very clever with your movement, with positioning, try and get wraps off with your shield drones. And that takes a lot of skill and practice to pull off because not a lot of Tau players are used to playing so aggressively and using the assault phase carefully. But I think if Tau players start doing that, they can really improve significantly and start competing for other GT wins and major wins. I think Tau is absolutely right up there in the meta.
Excellent. What are your next events you're gonna head into coming up?
So I'm going to try and play in all of the major events that are going to happen in the South in the next couple months. The South is kind of privileged in having several major tournaments coming up. The first is Crucible in Orlando in October. We've also got Warzone Atlanta. So hopefully I can get off the wait list on that and play there. And then there's also the Atlanta Open from Tabletop Pro. And all of that's going to be leading into LVO. So I hope to go to all 4 of those events and do as the best I can.
Excellent. And I'm going to ask you the same thing, John. I mean, this is talking about previous statements of there's no good players in Florida or the South, etc. This is just another notch in the belt for that statement that was made to be incorrect, right?
Yeah, I think we've well and buried that at this point. I don't think anyone who's actually paying attention to the game state anymore can really say that. I mean, you look at what I've done, Siegler's done, Mark Perry's done, Chris Blackham. Not to mention, I mean, both of you guys have had a lot of good success as well in events, but not just in the South. We can compete anywhere. What's next for me is same as Richard. I'm going to be going to Crucible. There's Coastal Assault in November. I'm probably not going to be able to make Warzone Atlanta. I'm on the wait list right now, but I think I'm going to have a work conflict, so I'm probably not going to be able to get out of that one. Kind of as a consolation prize, I'm going to try to make the SoCal Open, but that's about 50-50. Then I'm going to hit the Atlanta Open, the Pro Tabletop event in December, close out the year with LVO, and see where that takes us.
Well, you need to hurry up and try to get a ticket for Atlanta because didn't you win the skull necklace?
I did. I did win the skull necklace last year. I'm on the wait list right now. I think I got on that after the tickets, sold out while I blinked. But if I can't make it with work, I'll make sure that I talk to Horton, make sure that the skull necklace finds its way home for the next recipient to go collect.
Awesome, because I know Red right there's jumping at the bits to blood for the blood god.
Yeah, I'm all in on the Skull Throne this year, and so if I get an opportunity, I wouldn't. I know we haven't had a chance to play yet. We narrowly missed each other last year at Warzone, and so I wouldn't mind an opportunity, even if I do get handed a solid loss to my part. I'll take that just for the opportunity to play a game. So
I'm not quite as confident in that one as you are, but hey, I'd always enjoy it.
So I know you guys are on a timeline, and I know we're running late here. So, Richard, do you have anything to add? Any advice to Tau players out there that would love to take the Siegler list for a spin?
I would say first to start with listening to the Art of War podcast that was just released today. It's Nick Nanavati's new podcast, and in the last episode, we go through my list design, the philosophy behind the list, what are its favorable matchups, and kind of just the basics of how to actually play it. But the couple things I'd say right now is that I think if you want to take Tau to its, to the best that it can be, you should focus on its durability. I think that is Tau's greatest strength rather than its firepower. The most consistent Tau lists out there are those that rely on its durability, that all of your shooting is going to survive as long as possible. And so if you want to run these suit lists, I think that people should start upping their drone count. A lot of people are playing between 20 and 30 drones, and I think it's the 40 plus area where you start to hit a critical mass of man, these riptides just are not going to die in this game, or these commanders that are hiding behind them. So I think if people start experimenting with greater amounts of drones, that they're going to start finding even more success. The last thing I'd say is for those of you still running broadsides, please drop the broadsides. The Shadow Sun Castle just is not the way to go. It can win you games, but it's not going to win you tournaments. It's too static. It's too easy to wound. It's too immobile, and it's too easy to tag in this meta. So I think if you want to move to the next level, that triple Riptide, or if you want to go double Riptide and some ghost kills, like Will Taylor, that's the way to go. So.
Sorry, we lost Richard when he said use only 20 drones. Just go back a couple of minutes.
Just cut that out.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you being on, Richard. Congrats on the Nova victory. Obviously, we'll see each other soon. Hopefully, I can make it down to Crucible with you guys. And John, what do you think? As far as I know, you're building Marines right now. Do you think Marines will have the answer to, say, Gene Stealer Colt or even Richard's Tau?
I was going to say, or 40 drones.
I think Marines have the answer for everything in their book, honestly. I don't think you can put every answer together. If you look at the Marine, when I first looked at the Marine Codex, I thought it was just the most blindingly overpowered thing in the past 5 years. Once I actually started writing lists, I realized that you cannot fit every toy that you want, and it's not going to be an auto win like that. But I think that they absolutely have the weight of fire to kill the 40 drones. They just need to make sure they are also getting the anti-tank to deal with the riptides after the drones are gone. Because Marines can put a lot of AP 1 and 2, Strength 4 and 5 in a list. I'm still figuring out how the anti-tank's going to work, and that's something I'm probably going to go to Melee for. But I think Gene's third cult are still going to be in a great place. I think that Nova FAQ that it was so heavily maligned, I think that's about to become official policy from Games Workshop in the next month.
Saw a little bit of that today in the FAQ, right?
Yep.
Yeah. After they did the same thing with drop pods, I think we can see the writing on the wall there. So I'm going to start playing it that way for the rest of, until my Marine army is all painted. But until that point, I think Gene's third cult are viable. I just think that Marines are going to have a very strong answer to them. And for those first 2 or 3 months where they're dropping in those Marine supplements, I think that Marines are going to be so prevalent that I just don't want to bring Gene's third cult. At least until I figure out what the Marine builds are and how to play against them. At that point, I might open up the Gene's third cult again for LVO just to make sure I can hold on to my best in faction. But until then, I'm going to give Marines a try.
Excellent. Well, good answers. All right, guys. Well, I know it's getting late down there in Florida, and you guys turn into ravaging zombies and stuff and try to eat people's face like all the other Florida men. So we'll let you head to bed because I know you guys have to work in the morning. I appreciate you coming on, though.
Yeah,
really
thank you.
Appreciate it, guys. Congratulations again. Excellent performance.
Yeah, thank you.
Cheers. Thanks again for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Have a good one.
All right. So long.
So me and Red are going to continue talking a little bit. We're going to talk about the FAQ that came out today. We're also going to talk about Marines a little bit and give you a rundown of my Nova experience as well. I ended up going 7-2 at Nova. Won my bracket. I met a lot of great people there. The judging staff was actually phenomenal. From the TO level down to floor judges. I've met some of them before, and then some of them it was the first time I've met in person. The players, I had some great games, and then I've had 1 or 2 that was kind of on the fence. Played Justin Lois round 1. Took my first loss of the weekend, round 1. He was top 5 for the remainder of the tournament until he took a loss to Birdsong with all the orc mech guns, basically, or smasher guns, I would say. And that was kind of a punch in the gut. but we had to pick the pieces up and roll with it. I had some met some good people on the way back up. Continued to go all the way into day two, where I ran into Cameron, which had a extremely hard counter to my list, and it was a tough fought game. I managed to pull out at least I think it was 18 points on the loss there, so still trying to stay in it to win it. For bracket wise, I had never been to Nova, so I didn't know how the brackets worked. I know Red's been to Nova, and I kind of fed a little bit off of what his experience was. So I was going into the bracket after round 5 at 3-2. Um, the second loss I took was from Cameron with all of his haywire bikes and Grotz with no Overwatch, which is, as he described it, exactly built to kill my list with the grav tanks and destroyers, which couldn't fire Overwatch. So had to maneuver and pull out some shenanigans to, play my ass off, basically trying to get some points, even though I knew I was backed into a corner, losing all 3 grav tanks in less than 2 rounds kind of hurt. So that was it was a good game though. Cameron was a great player, so it was a very respectable loss to take. Disappointed in myself more or less, but trying to pull every point out I could. I did not know that the points stopped once you got bracketed, so that was kind of a interesting situation I found myself into, going, in search of ITC points.
Yeah, well, and it's definitely a learning experience, right? Because I mean, they've been doing it for a while, but it is a unique format to a certain degree, and it does take a little bit to. I mean, I had the same revelation last year, so I understand.
But it was still worth going.
Oh man, I mean, it is an experience.
Definitely
Anybody that hasn't gone, definitely need to go.
Yeah, being able to, we went up to the lounge, hung out, got the free popcorn, and listened to the Mike Brandt sing along. But it was good. There was a lot of great people there. There was 300 players in just the GT alone. They had the event itself. Kind of go on a tangent here, real fast. Was I was not fully aware of what the Nova Open was before I went.
Yeah.
Until we sat through, did some research, and then sat through the even the end speeches.
It's awesome. It's almost kind of mind blowing in the scope that they accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. After being involved in multiple big events and even smaller events for charity, just seeing the amount of money they raise, the amount of volunteers that they have put into this to make it happen, basically, and to donate so much, it was great to see. And you wonder why GW goes and assists and does what they do for them, and that's exactly why. Because they show a lot of heart and determination into making that stuff happen for other people. So why not?
Yeah.
Everyone from like I said, I gave mention to the judge staff. I mean, I'm not going to call them all out in person, but they made you feel, like you were home, like it was I was back in Atlanta kind of thing. So it was a really good experience, from top to bottom. The bracket was interesting. You play within your bracket. So if you've never done that before, it's kind of like an RTT on from game 6 on. So you play basically a 4-round RTT. One game after they bracket, and then you come back and play 3 games on Sunday. So it was a 4-round RTT, and you could only get ITC points based off of where you are in your bracket. That's how that shifted out. Got to play some beautiful armies. One of them I was extremely jealous over was a Grey Knight army by Chase Ackerman. He's actually army guy as well. Beautifully painted Grey Knight army. I was very jealous of because I've always wanted to play Grey Knights, but we discussed how they're just not the best competitively unless you use a lot of Forge World or whatnot. So maybe they'll get some Awakening stuff soon.
Yeah.
So, but that was my experience, and Nova is over and done. The GW staff was there. It was great for me to meet them and be able to work side by side during the Invitational a little bit. Getting actual rules answered by the writer himself.
Crazy,
was really
right?
Cool. Especially if they went my way. But yeah, it was really good experience. The takeaways from there was definitely go experience it for yourself. Even if you just do one and done, at least say you've done it. It was well worth it. The cause is well worth it as well for the Brandt family. Let's keep moving. Myself, right in the middle of Nova, with GW on staff watching, they decided to drop a Custode FAQ basically, which I was expecting. Not so much in the middle of the event, but it is what it is. And they didn't make us use the FAQ as the event was halfway over, but my list took a hit. What I was currently running, which again was to be expected. So I've already been planning on doing Space Marines, just like everybody else out there, I guess. So a little bit on the Space Marines. They did an FAQ that came out today to follow up on the Grey Knight FAQ. So what's your thoughts, Red, on the FAQ from this weekend, and then going into today's FAQ?
Yeah, so I want to. Yeah, there's a lot of bemoaning the development. So take like the Custodes deal, right? I want it to be recognized that everybody's been playing on the beta, right? It was a beta codex. They were going to bring it in line one way or the other.
Right.
And it would make sense that if I was going to look at, now don't get me wrong, there's some fair complaints here or there in different regards. I think the Telemon Dreadnought got a little bit of a heavy-handed response. But you saw Robin Cruddas there at Nova. Like maybe they perceived something that might have been off kilter with future releases, right? Maybe they're perceiving something going ahead.
Even in John's Invitational game, I could watch. I was videoing it, and you could see all of GW and Brandt and Phil standing over off to the side, pointing at all the Custodes. And the next day, the following morning, the FAQ came out.
Not saying there's a direct correlation, but
I do blame John. Now that he's off.
Fair enough. I mean, he definitely made it. He made a dent, right? But like, so the beta codex, the thing being like, so the Caladius tank gets hit, what everybody's groaning about. I really think it was fair. I think that it was a good switch. So I thought it was bringing the beta codex into its own, right? Sure, heaven forbid that you have to make a hard decision in how exactly you're going to build your list, right? But moving forward in the Space Marine stuff, man, and I think that a lot of this was common sense. I think that it was really, and don't get me wrong, like questions need to be asked, right? Like this whole thing's written in English, but whose exact perspective of English is something else entirely. But I do feel that the answers and I'm not saying that it's just me, but I feel out of the community, a lot of us looked at those questions that people were coming up with that were, I think, aptly answered in the Space Marine Codex. So take like the Gene Stealer deal out of Nova. The Space Marine drop pods got the same treatment, right? They ignore tactical reserves, but that doesn't mean that you get to keep them until turn 6. They have to come in before turn 3, before the before the end of turn 3, so that they're not destroyed. And then also like the ruling in regards of rights of battle and aura abilities and things like that. Like a lot of this stuff. The other good one I thought was there are some stratagems that say every time an attack is made, add this effect or something like that. And
Right.
there was a lot of consternation. And again, it's people trying to read through their interpretations of it. But there was a lot of consternation was, well, does that mean one attack or does that mean multiple attacks or what have you? And I think the FAQ pretty clearly answered that, again, in a very common sense fashion, without much left to be desired.
Right. And it a lot of the FAQ, including the drop pod, followed suit with what happened at Nova. The common sense part, like you said, questions have to be asked. If not, people are going to play it incorrectly.
Yep.
So, I mean, it goes back to there's no stupid questions,
Technically.
but then again, technically you're supposed to use common sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the big issue is, you kiss, right? Keep it simple and stupid.
Yeah.
So, the common sense is there. The ability to just read through the nonsense is there now with the FAQ. Drop pods can't come in past turn 3. That's super huge, and I didn't realize how huge it was, honestly, until I read through and experienced the Nova missions, where you got to pick your in-game or progressive, right? So, I mean, I didn't realize how, because I only had 2 games basically leading into LVO, or
Yep.
excuse me, Nova, with their mission pack, and I didn't click that 2 and 2 together was instant win
Mm-hmm.
by dropping in at the last round.
That's right.
So I could definitely see where that correlates into something that should not be in the game.
Well, and you can see where people going into Nova with Gene Stealer Cult imagining that they were going to do just that. And
Yeah,
how
ready
they're
to use it, right? Yeah, and part of me says you can't blame them, but part of me says they know better, right? And that's the common sense that has to be printed, or else you have those different vibes.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, and the whole Chicken Little thing with the drop pods has now been taken care of. We've talked about the drop pods here on the show, kind of in several different mentions, but I don't think they're going to be the end all to end all. But then again, they're really good with the way that the FAQ came out. Where it says you can choose whether or not you want the doors to come down. It doesn't say, and I was hoping, just for, like you said, common sense wise, or keeping it simple, would be they would say one way or the other.
Yeah.
Just to create the or not create the feel bads or the arguments at the table that are going to ensue on certain invasive or abusive.
Well, and I'll be honest. I mean, not that this is a declaration by any means, but at least as far as I go, for the drop pods that I may or may not play for myself, I am probably not going to drop the doors. I will leave it as one solid. I feel that opening the proverbial drop pod here, like doing that and having all the pedals, the doors open essentially, is just going to lead to more complications than maybe necessary. And because when you think of the range of those drop pods when they come down and the doors are open, and if you can disembark 3 inches out from the doors or whatever, the amount of space that that thing takes up is just ungainly. It is disruptive, to say the best, to say the best.
And again, like I said, it can be very abusive if you're, depending on which way you're going to use it. And that's why I was hoping GW would take the higher road and say you have to do one or the other, or at least stay consistent, right? If you're going to open one, you open all of them. If you're going to keep one closed, you keep it all closed. Because that's a huge footprint you're leaving, and there's nothing else in the game that does that footprint that I'm aware of, or you have the choice to do that footprint with. Outside of a 30-man plague bearer unit spreading, that's pretty huge.
Yeah.
So with that being said, one of the big things that we're waiting on the FAQ obviously to happen, the big one, which I'm not sure how much more they can throw at you outside of Space Marine book just came out, did the FAQ on it. Custodes beta, they just did the non-beta version of it. I as well with you think that it was pretty fair. And after playing with the grav tanks, even though you don't see them a whole lot in the top 5 or so, they were still ruling they were the old knights, right?
Yeah.
So they were the feel bads almost. Now my prediction is with the grav tanks going back on the shelf, and I've had people argue with me about this, but this opens up the door heavily for Eldar and Dark Eldar. With Marines coming full circle, grav tanks going away, Chaos has kind of been situational as far as what Chaos players have jumped to between. They went from the Purge to the Disco Lords to the Chaos Knights, and then kind of you're still going to have the Vessel style list out there floating around until GW gets their hands on it or whatnot. So, what would you say? Because I still predict that Eldar's coming back at this point. If with the grav tanks gone for the most part and multi-wound Space Marine models coming back.
Yeah, so I mean, we've still got more supplemental codexes to Space Marines inbound, and I think that Space Marines, to go off of what John was saying earlier, I do think that Space Marines are going to be very, they're going to be a multi-tool going into the meta going forward. Now, given that, I highly doubt that the Space Marine, we got these. I mean, you were there. GW gave a sneak peek of the way ahead on Psychic Awakening and what exactly that means, and I bet you the Eldar are going to have a piece of that sooner than later in regards of what Psychic Awakening definitely entails. And so with that, I agree. I don't think Eldar are going to be idle. I think that the Space Marine Codex and the supplements have shown us what some of the benefits for mono codex are going to be. And so I think if there's one codex we know was already pretty effective by itself, it was the Eldar Codex. And to think that it might be even more should be somewhat concerning for folks. Because just like it was lined out, I mean, I think Richard went on, Eldar scatter bikes.
Right.
I mean, like that. And then you tie in some of their psychic powers. Those psychic powers have always been crushing enablers in the meta. And so I think it's going to be pretty effective. I think the Eldar, I mean, if we look back to some of the releases, we've got benefits to all Space Marines, to include Chaos Space Marines. You're talking about Death Guard stepping up to the plate, Thousand Suns, not counting the Space Marine supplemental codexes. You're talking Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Space Wolves. I mean, there's just a lot of power armor out there. And then you're going to bring in something like a heavily weighted Eldar codex on top of it, and it's going to be a very aggressive meta.
Right. And, I'm sad to see them go in a way, because I was glad that there was something out there that would take care of the Eldar flyer spam.
Yeah.
But if those go away, outside of Tau, what really is there to combat that, right?
You're talking about outside of with the flyers?
Yeah, I mean that's something that we as competitive players, we all wanted to see kind of nixed a little bit. But
That's assuming that they retain that advantage going forward, right? I think that's kind of the key thing when we talk about the big FAQ and upcoming chapter approved. There might be more hits to this -1 to hit capability versus other benefits that might disrupt the current advantage they have. And so it's like, if they remain as is, sure, like I could see there being a problem, but I think if anything, I think GW's kind of, they're refining their direction on dice rolling versus re-rolling all hits or wounds or what have you versus just failed hits and wounds.
right.
And furthermore, if anything's a good indicator, Raven Guard, +1 to cover, and then if they're in terrain, they're then also -1 to hit.
Right.
That would be a stronger indicator.
Yeah, because that would definitely take away the planes inept to be -2 or -3 even
Exactly.
with reflexes. It would definitely be an interesting situation if they do that, because planes can't get cover.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, and then if you take what if it comes out, and I'm not saying this is anything, I'm just saying, they could go all kinds of directions. What if chapter approved comes out and flyer detachments get limited to 1 per battle forged army? There's a lot of ways to address an issue.
yeah, they're definitely, and they have the tools to do it, is what you're saying, but it's up to them to do it, obviously.
Correct.
Dark Eldar, for instance, in my opinion, is still really good. There's a lot of good builds out there still, and there's a lot of multi damaged weapons like disintegrator cannons that just pick up Primaris Marines in general.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. Not to mention, any kind of poison or anything works still great with power armor.
Yeah.
Because the amount of shots you put in. So obviously, Nova was a completely different field. We saw a lot of orc armies at the top, but they also, you wouldn't play that in a normal ITC world tournament because they would just bleed kill points.
Well, and that's the cool thing. We talked about this last time. I do like different formats. I like approaching different play styles. I do like adapting my army fit to whatever. And you're right. Like, there are certain things that are not good in Nova versus ITC versus what have you, right? Like, you need to, you saw it to a certain extent, right? Like, guard can't do as well, at least in my opinion, versus maybe something with a little more staying power in a Nova format where you have to endure until the beginning of your next round to score, right? Whereas ITC, you move, and you get to an objective and you're suddenly holding it and you score those points at the end of that turn. And it really does make enough of a difference to make it significant.
Yeah, having to hold the objective for the most part for the whole turn was very tough.
Yeah, I bet.
And very very easy to blow someone's army off an objective and deny them from it. So
yeah,
especially the way Nova does some of their objective markers on the outside of the field. where it's not near, that's out in the open.
Right.
So, but yeah, it was. I think Marines are going to be solid. We've said on here before that Marines are probably going to be their worst enemies. The foremost dreadnought is out.
He sure is. He sure is. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have two of them at least. The third one will be the icing on the cake if I go that direction. I've put together six. Let's see. I've got six eliminators together so far. I've got how many more? I've got a lot more to go.
Are you running them with the sniper bolt pistol or bolters, basically?
Yes, yeah. I mean, these are the ones out of Shadow Spear. I think that the Space Marine Codex, now, as much as I love my dream of a Phobos brigade, I think that the Space Marine Codex definitely has the answer to anti-armor. I'm with John. Like, it needs some play testing to really figure out exactly what that looks like. There's a lot of good things that you could throw out there, but I do think that the eliminators with the sniper rifles, not the laser anti-tank rifles. I think that those sniper rifles, and then the sergeant with the instigator rifle to allow him to fall back.
Fall back.
I mean, it's still a good weapon, right?
Yeah, and that's a big point. Some people were missing on online. Basically, I wrote a Space Wolf list for someone earlier today, using the new Primaris basically, and including the eliminators. And I had to point out to someone else that if you don't take that exact rifle, which is what the rules state, that you're not allowed to do that move.
That's right.
So if you give all three of them the Fusel, then you can't do it. So
that's right.
The sergeant has to have that rifle, or else you're not allowed to do the fallback. But still, being able to shoot the rifle and then two Fusels on Overwatch is still pretty good.
It is. It is. Well, I mean, those Fusels are intense. I mean, you're talking strength 8, AP -3, 3 damage, I think.
3
like,
flat.
Those are good. Yeah, 3 flat, right? And then, I mean, I like them a lot, but I do want to play around. I'm going to play test with the sniper rifles with some character targeting, because we go back into, Eldar and other codexes out there that are character intensive.
Right.
You start picking out those. You bring a scalpel, like 3 eliminator units, and you can start picking out characters throughout other people's armies.
Yeah, and even with the Phobos brigade, you can almost limit flyers to where they're going to be able to go with that if you set up correctly. And you don't. This is one of the things I was talking to someone earlier about with that list, was you don't have to even put. The infiltrators don't need to be in the middle of the field if they don't need to be there, right?
That's absolutely right. You do not have to feed units to your opponent if you don't need to.
Correct. So if you're going to run things like, let's say a Leviathan, for instance, you want to protect it, right? So you can almost tri-point your Leviathan with that squad, and that now you're looking at a 13.5-inch charge or so. Just to do it. And there's no one. I mean, you can't do a 13-inch charge.
Right.
So.
No, I mean, and that's the big thing. Like, being able to block out Gene Stealer's 3-inch, deep striking ability, being able to block out drop pods and Vanguard vets, and exactly, all kinds of stuff that could deep strike. Maybe a Bloodthirster or something like that. Being able to block that out and make them do a 12-inch. Or not even be able to, because they're outside of that distance.
Right.
It's just, and when you think about it, man, like you're saying, tri-pointing an objective. I mean, they really create 24 inches, a 24-inch diameter of negative space, right? Each model.
Yeah.
So it's just so big. I mean, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, and if you manage to keep them at max coherency, it's even further. I mean,
Yep.
it's just wild. It's such a great ability and tool to have that is going to be misplayed a little bit probably by some.
Sure.
But
Board control is key, and it always has been.
yeah, it's going to be super huge now. That's the whole zoning out or the ability of plague bearers to stretch across and do what they have to do is big as well. So, but I think that kind of takes care of the FAQ. It takes care of the custodes, and we talked a little bit about Nova tonight. So, meta wise, I think Marines are in a good spot. Um, Hoping to see what happens here with the with GW once they get back from their Nova trip as well. See what kind of brain trust they can throw at us. So if it's shield drones going down, plague bearers going down, flyers, something. See what all those are probably the three biggest shakeups that could happen. Nothing else really out there throws me off of I can think of.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, there's more to come for sure. But I think that it was really good to see a lot of the streams and everything that came out of Nova. Like I said last time, Nova really is kind of like the halfway point for the overall ITC season. And so from here on, like here we go. I mean, it's time we're closing that distance to LVO. And I'm looking forward to seeing just how much the battlefield's going to adjust meta wise as products continue to come out from GW going forward.
I agree. It's going to be an interesting time on this road to LVO. The end of the year, basically, or the start of a new season wise. I am currently looking at hitting the codex pretty hard on Space Marines, trying to figure out what I want to do. Give it a run. I've been looking even at Dark Angels.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options out there, and anyone that plays Dark Angels or Wolves or anything, I feel strongly that with the new abilities, not only did you get really cool stuff, but you also don't have to worry about how am I going to fit such and such in this army and still keep my doctrines.
Yep.
I think doctrines are kind of still a trap for some.
They can be. Yeah.
So if you're trying to build your army around that, it can definitely be a trap.
Well,
So,
it's like anything, right? Like just like so. I mean, there's so many things that go into to the Siegler list that just because Richard comes on and says, go 40 drones, like you got to know how to employ that. You got to know what you're doing with it, right? Like there is a reason why he says to move on from broadsides, like why he's urging folks for that. But you got to understand why he's saying as much, right? And so there's more to it, just like what you're saying. Like when it comes to the codex, understanding exactly what all those pieces do, and people just got to get it out there on the table and actually make sure that they're fitting these things together. When it comes to some of the Dark Angel stuff, I mean, even I admit, you showed me that other list the other night, and like, I know what you're saying. I just got to see it play itself out a little bit to be able to really visualize the effects that
right.
can synchronize there. And I think we've talked about some other exciting stuff that has kind of gone maybe a little unnoticed or under the table in regards of what's out there and readily available with these advancements made, via the Space Marine Codex and the ensuing facts that have enabled some of these other codexes, like, between Dark Angels, Blood Angels, Death Watch, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just give you an example. For instance, like the Space Marine, Space Wolves, being able to use some of the new Primaris stuff,
Yeah.
and then they get extra attacks, and they can screen now. They can infiltrate, You know, when was the last time you had something that was a huge threat in the middle of the field that took pressure off your wolfen, for instance?
Well, and for them, remember, I mean, their scouts being elite choices, like they
They
didn't
didn't
have
have access.
they didn't have that access so readily, right? I mean,
Right.
sure, it is. I get it. I understand. Infiltrators are 110 points versus a scout squad that's 55. Like, I totally understand the point difference, but at the same time, like, that's a troop choice now for the wolves.
And you still get so much out of it.
Yeah, you do. I
Yeah.
mean, it's very utility. It's not a super heavy hitting squad, but it is utility in approach.
Yeah. And again, one of the characteristics of those lists were always you want to be on the charging side, you don't want to be on the charged side.
Yeah.
So that gives you the ability to definitely be there. So, all
Yeah.
right. Well, I think we've hit every topic we were going to talk about tonight. We've definitely had some great players on with some good advice tonight. Nova again, if you haven't been, definitely look out and start planning now. Um, it was kind of a little pricey for myself, but if you plan now, it's a whole lot easier than trying to do like me and plan last minute.
That's
So
right.
definitely look into that and look into the charity that they give and why. It'll make you feel a whole lot better about going. To know that you're helping out other people. So, from us at the Alpha Strike, strike hard, strike fast, show no mercy, and always sweep the leg.
Take care, folks.